Hello and welcome. I'm Rashi Mogha, and this is the Empowered Women of the World podcast, a podcast where we talk about technology, leadership, and success. Welcome to season 3. This month, as we celebrate Juneteenth and Pride Month, we celebrate diversity and the role it plays in our collective history. So today's podcast is focused on how the DEI landscape is evolving and the role that each one of us can play in making this world an inclusive world and making our workplaces inclusive. In my LinkedIn newsletter, I had shared one of the top trends of 2022 is that DEI initiatives will no longer be optional. You would argue that most companies today have a DEI program. And that's true, but the reality is that for most companies, these programs haven't changed the way they think and the way they operate. And the biggest reason why these initiatives have not been successful is because these initiatives are made an HR responsibility and they're shoved under as a program under a CHRO. As a result, diversity and inclusion function competes with the HR function for resources and funding, and hence they can't build out anything meaningful except for a few DEI e-learning modules or workshops that really don't help change the culture of an organization. The organization structures need to change, and the chief diversity officers need to be elevated to a position where they have both a seat and a voice at the table. And DEI should not just reflect in HR data. It needs to reflect in the data sets, in the AI algorithms, in the UX, in the products and the services that a company builds, the customers, vendors, and the partners that it works with, and the marketing strategy that it builds. So today, I am so excited to welcome Nickoria Johnson, the Chief Diversity Officer at Credera, on today's podcast to share her move from a tech leader to a Chief Diversity Officer role and how she's bringing a holistic lens and a holistic approach to the DEI initiatives at Credera and beyond. Nickoria, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Rashim. I'm very excited to be here, and I have been following your podcast for years now. So excited to finally be here with you.
I am so excited to have you today, and I can't believe that you and I have known each other for 5 years now, and you hadn't yet been on my podcast. So I am super excited about it. Now, Nickoria, I've seen your transition from a tech leader to a CDO, and I would love for you to share that journey with our audience.
Yeah, I would love to. So I guess my tech career really started way back in high school. And the reason I bring that up is because a program sponsored by our local urban league was designed to connect youth from underserved communities with technology companies. And so if that had not happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. That's why I'm a huge advocate of these types of programs where companies can make an impact. But let me get back to my story. So coming out of college, I served as a system administrator and a developer. And when I was looking around, I definitely found myself being the only in the room, almost in every space I was in, whether that was the server room or the conference room, the only woman of color. And in my mid-20s, I found consulting because I discovered I was a people person. And during consulting, I had a chance to travel internationally and really experience what it's like to be immersed in global cultures. And that was something that really opened my eyes to things beyond what we see here in the US, and really learning to appreciate the value of diverse friend groups, diverse people that I serve with, and just making me feel like I was more of a part of. And so when I left consulting and went into industry, I started leading technology teams at global retailers. And that's when I really began to notice that as I was developing my teams and selecting the people for my teams, my teams look different than other teams. My teams were quite diverse in terms of cultural background, in terms of women being represented. And I really think that's because I've always been very open and intrigued by, by other people, other cultures, and trying to focus on unlocking potential in people. So I landed back in consulting about 3 years ago here at Credera, and I was immediately drawn to, mentoring our women's network and trying to really help support and shape the younger folks here in terms of their career development. But then George Floyd's murder happened. And all of a sudden, all of this civil unrest and social unrest that continued to occur just kind of left me feeling like it was time for me to really lean in and do more to help through this time of hurt that a lot of people were experiencing. So at Credera, we ended up doing some panels, we had some listening sessions, and I found myself being even more immersed in, the development of ways to unite us corporately and to provide support. And so last year, our executive team and our CEO decided that, hey, we really need full-time senior and strategic focus on all things DE&I. And so last June, I was named CDO. And of course, my life and focus changed quickly. Now, every day I get to wake up, be intentional about making an impact, creating space, and building towards more equity. And I really feel like my background in technology and in consulting really helps me to show up as a really strategic leader, right? Because the things that I'm looking at are across the entire landscape of the company, all of the groups that we can intentionally, build towards more equity and more support. And that's a little bit different, being data-driven, being able to shape strategy, those are things that I think I bring to the table uniquely that have really helped me to develop quickly into this role and hopefully continue to make an impact.
And the fact that it is a CEO initiative at Credera, you report into the CEO at Credera,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, and now I'm a part of the partner team as well. And so it's really a huge move on the part of Credera to invest the time, the resources, and then also to create the autonomy and the space for things to be different, and for net new ideas to come to bear.
So Nickoria, as a technology leader, as a business leader, and now as a CDO, in your experience, where do organizations and leaders need most support in building an inclusive culture?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is some organizations need to kind of gut check themselves. Some organizations are either too big to see that they have a problem with inclusion or diversity, or they feel like if they're meeting their compliance or regulatory standards, that they're in good shape. So I would challenge that and say, you really have to be able to listen to the voice of your people. The second thing I would say is organizations, again, need the senior leadership to truly value inclusion, diversity, and equity, to be able to align their strategies and their culture shaping to forward DE&I. And I'm a big believer in speed of the leader, speed of the team. And so if your leaders at the top of the company are not fully vested in DE&I and not willing to make the investments that they need to shape things, you're setting yourself up for failure, or God forbid, some performative allyship, which is nothing that anyone should want in their organization. And then in terms of listening to the voices of their people, you have to really understand that everything has changed since the summer of 2020 and with the pandemic. Our workforces are not sitting back anymore and just showing up to work. They want to show up as their full selves. They want to have companies that stand for something. And so we really have to make sure we're providing the right platforms to listen and create and amplify the voice of our employees and create more empathy and inclusion in the workplace.
And I really think you brought up such a good point, Nickoria, over there, that listening part is so important, and listening to understand and not to react or respond immediately.
Exactly.
And that's where I personally feel sometimes, where the biggest gap is, because we almost feel like we have to respond immediately to what we are hearing, and there is much more work that needs to be done in truly listening and internalizing how the culture of the organization may or may not impact the inclusive leadership that we want to build.
Absolutely. And like you said, listening to understand, right? A lot of times I think we, as just human nature, is to kind of balk at something that you find yourself being defensive about. In a lot of cases, when you do listen to the voices, there might be some things that are truly wrong in your organization. And you have to be mature enough to listen to understand, and then go a step further, really figure out how to solve for that challenge that you're hearing. And, feelings are real, perception is real, the things people are experiencing are real. So being sensitive to really being a good listener is really important.
So I'm curious, what solutions are you building at Credera to address this?
Wow, we have been on a really aggressive journey over the last year since I've been in this role. We now have 10 ERGs, and we've really pushed past the fact that, or the thinking that DE&I is only about gender and race, right? We are providing platforms for inclusion and intentional support and community, not just for our BIPOC Crederians and our women, but we're also listening and engaging to our LGBTQ plus team members, our veterans, our folks with disabilities, or abilities as I like to call them. And we're providing spaces and opportunities to focus on mental health and well-being as well. So I'm very proud that we are looking at inclusion from so many different lenses, because every community or every pocket is important. And the more we can understand, the better we are. We also are providing a lot of layers of training and thought leadership for employees to experience personal growth and to show up as even more inclusive leaders. One of my favorite things that we did, we just conducted a 3-part inclusive leadership roundtable experience. And the folks that went through that were really able to find personal elements that they can apply. And it was very application based. And we need more of that happening at companies. Because, once we're able to create those places for more empathy, those aha moments, the better we'll be. And then lastly, we're really partnering from a community service perspective with organizations that we can give of our time and talents into, but at the same time, those experiences create more learning and growth for our employees as well. So lots of things on our roadmap that we're doing. We're looking at supplier diversity. We're looking at, how do we best engage our communities internally. So we're doing a lot, and it's been a journey. We're not done yet, but we're definitely moving forward.
I think DEI is the space where you're never really done. It's always a journey.
Absolutely. I agree, 100%.
So what advice do you have for allies and leaders who are embarking on their DEI journey? And this is both as individuals and organizations, because I feel that the DEI journey is unique to each one of us, and then unique to our organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the first thing, and I mentioned it earlier, invest resources in DE&I. Invest in your executive level leadership. Invest in bringing in support from the outside. Invest in thought leadership and training that is real and relevant. A lot of companies think we can do this in-house. We can do this on our own. Well, honestly, because of what you mentioned, Rashim, earlier, it's table stakes to have demonstrated investment in DE&I. And we've got to make sure that in this ever-changing market, we're supporting our employees well and creating space for our next generation of leaders. The second thing that I would say is, educate yourselves on a personal level and an organizational level on social issues, on the multi-generational workforce, on cultural experiences, and really immerse yourself in a diverse set of friends, coworkers, community. If all of your people, quote unquote, in your tribe look exactly like you or from the same background as you, you are absolutely missing out on the opportunity to experience change from within. And as we all know, as each person has those personal aha moments, more empathy is created, and those individual things in a collective space can transform an organization one person at a time. And the last thing I'll say is empathy really is the great uniter, and unity is something that I like to believe we all want.
Yeah, wouldn't that be so nice if we could just find a way to live happily ever after together, right?
It's not impossible, but we have to be really intentional. And again, we all have to figure out how as humans to walk this walk together. Yep. And I think our corporations in this time and day and age are really key. Most of us spend the most time at work throughout the week than with our families and with our communities. And so the work is the place for us to really experience that growth, and hopefully at the end of the day, experience joy.
Yes, that's the nirvana state. Well, thank you so much, Nickoria, for joining us today and sharing your experiences and insights with us. I know you and I often have this conversation, but I'm so glad that we are sharing this with our eWOW audience.
Absolutely. I thank you so much for having me on today's podcast, and I really look forward to continuing to be a part of the eWOW family and doing some more amazing things to empower women of the world.
We are forever grateful for you to be a part of the eWOW family. And today's resource for you, my dear audience, is the link to the eWOW video on how to build psychological safety in teams. The link is in the show notes below. As always, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for loving, liking, supporting, and sharing the podcast. Remember, sharing is caring. I look forward to seeing you again in our next podcast. Till then, keep empowering the world.